Audio Jungle.
Just can't tell it all.
Audio Jungle.
All right, welcome back to Faith Talk, where we talk all things at the intersection of faith and real life. And today is going to be no different. Your host, Dr. Robinson, and I'm back with another episode. And I'm excited about the guest that I have in the studio with us on today. And so I'm going to give a brief introduction of who she is, and then I'm going to ask her to come and share with us who she is in her own way. Our special guest today is Miss Josilin Stafford. She is a graduate of Albany State University in Albany, Georgia. She's a criminal justice major, has both a bachelor's and a master's degree in criminal justice. She's currently the records data specialist with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office in Tampa, Florida. And moreover, she is a fellow podcaster, and she has a very interesting podcast that goes by the name of What in the Black History ? At the end. And so she also is a personal friend of ours. She is my son's god sister. And so as well as professionally, we also have a connection personally. So I'm excited and pleased to have her with us on today. And so I will just present to many and introduce to others, Miss Josilin Stafford. What's going on, Miss Jocelyn?
Oh, thank you for having me. This has been kind of in the works for a while.
Yeah.
So as Pastor Robinson has said, my name is Jocelyn. I am 38 years old. I live in Tampa, Florida. I am actually originally from Tampa, Florida. I have lived across at least 4 states in the South. Graduated from high school at Mandeville High School in Mandeville, Louisiana. And we moved to Slidell in 2003, right after I graduated high school. And then I was in college when we actually officially met.
Right. Yeah.
And
All right. So,
Earl was still a baby.
yeah. So we've known Miss Jocelyn for a number of years. Errol, my son Errol, kind of connected with the family when he was 6 months old. And we've been connected ever since. So we thank God for you all, your family as well. Shout out to Mr. Greg and Miss Willia Stafford here in Slidell, Louisiana. All right. So as I mentioned in the introduction, you have a podcast called What in the Black History? And so what I wanted to ask is what inspired you to start that particular podcast, and what is up with the name? How did you come up with the name or the title of your podcast, What in the Black History?
So when I initially was thinking about starting my podcast, it was based off of listening to other podcasters, and they were encouraging people to start their own podcasts. And I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts. Criminal justice major is going to happen. And the hostesses on those shows were like, hey, start your own podcast. And then while that was going on, here in Florida, our powers that be decided at that time, around that same time, to basically take Black history out of schools. And for me, I'm like, that's kind of a disservice, because if you don't learn all history, you are doomed to repeat it. In the interim, while I was thinking about this, I mentioned it to my mom. I was like, hey, Mom, I think I want to start a podcast. And my mom, being the number one cheerleader that I have, she's like, yeah, go for it. So at that time, I was like, okay, what do I want to talk about? As much as I love true crime, I was like, I don't think I could deliver it as well as the ladies of the podcast that I listen to. And then I was like, okay, we have other stuff. What else am I passionate about? And I was like, okay, I love history. And then it just happened to be around the corner from Black History Month. And I was like, you know what? I think I want to do a Black History podcast. The name What in the Black History came because I didn't want it to be just Black History podcast. I wanted it to more so stand out so that it makes you question, okay, what is this happening in Black history? And another one of the big influences I grew up in the AME church, and I grew up in Ninth Episcopal. And a lot of times, like when it came to Black History Month, we had our Black History program, and we didn't do just the traditional Black History program. We had the What Am I So, or Who Am I? Black History program where we had to dress up like the person that we were emulating. And I remember one year I was Dr. Ernest Everett Just. So I had on my mom's lab coat, I had her goggles, I had my dad's briefcase, and I'm like, I am Dr. Ernest Everett Just. I did, this, that, and the third. And then it's like, okay, so we'll go from there. And of course, my first episode was about the AME Church because that's where I grew up.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of history behind that.
Mhm.
So that is where the name came from and how I really started doing the podcast, because I was like, it's kind of a disservice to not speak on history simply because it makes people uncomfortable. History is not about being comfortable. It has good, bad, ugly, and different, but it's good to learn those things so that you don't repeat it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely concur. History, especially African American history, there's a lot of untold stories, unsung heroes, and a lot of our younger generations are not even aware of many of these heroes and sheroes that we have and the things that we have to offer. So, in mainstream education, there is a push to try to kind of get the African American story, keep it from being told because it does make some individuals uncomfortable. But, history, like you say, history is what it is. And, you know, even if mainstream education doesn't value it, I know that in the African American community, we should definitely value it so that we'll know who we are and what contributions we've made to this society. So yeah. So one of the questions I wanted to ask was, when it comes to the episodes, when you're developing or getting ready to do your episodes, what's kind of your process for deciding on which particular events or individuals that you're choosing to highlight in that particular episode? How do you decide, or how do you come up with who you're gonna feature, or which episode? How do you decide the event or
So
in
I actually
the
use it's kind of like a Wheel of Fortune wheel, and I'll basically spin it because I'll put the names in that I want to potentially do for the time that I want to do it. And I kind of spin it. It's like, okay, we'll do this because I don't want to just home in and it's like, okay, I don't want to do just inventors. I don't want to do just doctors. I don't want to just do baseball history or anything of that nature. I want to do all of it. And
yeah.
then growing up, I don't know if you remember the Tom Jordan morning show. They
Mm-hmm.
used to
Oh yeah.
have the little known Black history facts.
Mm-hmm.
So on blackamericaweb.com, they have a list of a lot of the little known Black history facts. And before I started my podcast, a few years ago, I would actually post little known Black history facts that I actually found on Black America Web. And then I was like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what? They have a lot of subject matter on here and they don't go into as many details. So I actually took the time to go through all of the pages that they had, and I was like, okay, this topic looks interesting. We don't really hear about this person. Let me get this and let me see if I can actually do my own research to see if I can dive in and get more information. And
Okay.
then from there, I made my list of topics. I have a packet full of list of topics, and then I pretty much take one page and put it on my little wheel, fortune wheel, spin it, and it's like, okay, this is the topic we're going to do this week. This is the topic we're going to do this week. And during that time, I do my Google research. I start printing stuff out. I look up stuff on Google. I'll find legitimate websites because not everybody is. And it's like, okay, we go from here. And I'm one of those people, I have to have it in front of me. So I'll start highlighting information. And it's like, okay, some of this information is matching some of the other websites' information. So let
Mm-hmm.
me not, duplicate it. And then after that, then I'll go and combine it together to try to get it into a smooth format so that when I'm
Mm-hmm.
reading it, it comes off, like it's cohesive.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So that process, how long does that process normally take? The researching and the preparation for the episodes? Is it?
It can take hours, it can take weeks. It just depends on how much information I have. And
Okay.
there are times when I have had to scrap a topic because I just did not have enough information on it. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to just do this little 2-minute blurb of an individual unless I'm doing maybe a special episode. So it's like, let
Mhm.
me go to a different topic that I know I have a lot more information on. We might be able to circle around back to this person at a
Okay.
different day.
Okay. I see. So what do you find more I guess more interesting in your research? Is it events, historical events, or historical figures?
I find that the events are more interesting to me because a lot of the events you don't hear a lot about.
Hmm.
And I do the people, places, things, and events. And there's places like here, there's a place, Eatonville, Florida, is actually the oldest Black-owned municipality. That is where Zora Neale Hurston is from. Found that
Okay.
out, did not know that. And so that's when I did a deep dive on that one. And then, of course, there was I knew about the Rosewood massacre, but I hadn't really gone into detail because they had the video back in the 90s about Rosewood, but they didn't really go into all of the details. And I'm like, okay, this one is interesting. They had the German Coast uprising that happened in Louisiana, that
Yeah.
I did not actually know about. So it was very interesting dealing with the places more so than the figures. The figures are interesting too, but it's like hearing about these places like Seneca Village. I knew nothing about Seneca Village, which is now in part of where Central Park is.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Yeah, because typically when we think, with February, Black History Month. So usually when we hear Black History Month, usually people highlight individuals. There's the Martin Luther Kings, there's the Thurgood Marshalls, there's the Ida B. Wells, there's the,
Rosa
Fannie Lou Hamer,
Parks.
Rosa Parks, of course, And so, I was curious to hear, which one was more exciting or more engaging for you to do research because I am a social studies teacher and having taught certain content, a lot of times it is those events that we don't hear a lot about, and having to talk about the German Coast uprising and all the Colfax massacre and all that stuff, talking about Louisiana stuff. And there's a lot of other events that have been recorded that we do not hear about because when you speak of Rosewood, we saw the movie and, in many cases, a lot of people are not even aware of some of these events, so I would imagine that, researching events definitely it's a lot, it's a lot. And there are plenty other events out there that we don't hear anything about because usually, like I said, Black History Month is Black History Month. And we're going to highlight those figures and we'll talk about that, do the parades and all that kind of stuff, do some speeches and that's that. But there's a whole lot more to be uncovered and discovered as it relates to the rich history and the contributions of African Americans. So we really appreciate the work that you're doing. Um, and so you mentioned that you were able to uncover some surprising facts on some of the podcasts. Have you ever had any particular episode that really sparked some I guess some debate or some some real chatter as it relates to your listeners, any from feedback, like they may have heard about a particular episode, may have heard a particular episode you did and it really kind of sparked conversation or some kind of interaction, or even some dislike. Have you ever had any encounters like that with any
As of
from
yet,
any?
no.
Okay. Okay.
As of
All
yet,
right.
no.
Usually.
And I always give my trigger warnings to people when I do some of those more sensitive episodes. And I always let
Hmm.
people know, hey, you do not have to listen if this is something that if you're uncomfortable, you don't have to listen. I always say, like, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. Well, you can lead a person to knowledge, you can't make them think.
Hmm.
It's out there for you, but I'm not going to force it down your throat.
Hmm.
If you really want to learn, that's what it's for. It's not to bash anybody. And just like I think we spoke once before, I told you that there are 3 people that you won't really hear about on my podcast unless they're like a background characters, and
Hmm.
I call them the big 3,
Okay.
which is Dr. Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X, because a lot of times that's what people amount Black history to.
Hmm.
And I want to do more of the things that people have not heard of, or maybe they've heard of it, but they haven't heard all of the details.
Yeah. And so your feedback, so it sounds like the feedback has been, well, the feedback that you've received, I'm assuming is just positive feedback from people who have consumed your podcast information, your podcast episodes and information that you're sharing.
Yes.
Usually positive feedback.
Yes.
Okay.
And then it's good to be able to see what they think.
Hmm.
It won't change the subject matter, but it is good to see how the listeners think so that I can be like, okay, I can do more of this. Maybe I can do more of these episodes and then for future dates and then go from there.
Okay. All right. So when you think about, and I always ask this question, when it comes to the work that you're doing, what has been one of your major, or have you had? Let me ask it this way: have you had any major challenges as it relates to, um, doing the work that you're doing? Like, I know you mentioned that you have a process for coming up with content, but are there any challenges outside of that kind of is a challenge for you being able to consistently produce the content and stuff that you're putting out?
It forces me not to procrastinate. It
Yeah.
forces me not to procrastinate so that I can make sure that I'm consistent. And I believe consistency is key. So that's why I try to do a lot. I do a lot of pre recording. So when I record, I'm actually recording for a whole month usually. So I will
Hmm.
sit there, do all my highlighting, get all my notes together, and then I'll just record everything, do all my editing, and then do the release dates so that it's like, okay, I can breathe a little bit and
Hmm.
then do it all over again when it's time.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it. And my biggest challenge when you said procrastination, all I could do was laugh because that's my biggest issue too. Fighting procrastination, trying to make sure that I am consistent. Because as a podcaster, you want to make sure that you're showing up on some kind of a cadence so that people can expect to receive, stuff from you. And that's my biggest challenge as well. There are times when I'm on point and I got it. And then there's challenge, I get challenged in my schedule. And then before you know it, I'm all off kilter. And then people are asking me, hey, when you going to drop another podcast? And I'm like, that's not good at all. Yeah.
My mom has been on me a lot because there's been times she's like, excuse me, my episode didn't come out. I'm like, Mama, I'm working on it now. so,
Yeah.
so
And
yeah,
it's a
it's a process. It's a challenge trying not to procrastinate, but I think I'm getting better at getting into the flow of doing the podcast.
Yeah, yeah, me as well. So, do you have any? So, let me ask you this: so, do you have have you ever had any guests to come on your podcast, or is it primarily just your research and your sharing the information and perspectives that you have? Do you have any?
Have not
Do you
had
have
any
any?
guests yet.
Okay,
Haven't had any
okay.
guests yet. I've been thinking about getting guests, like doing special episodes and bringing people on there to tell their Black history stories because we
Hmm.
have a lot of living history and it would be nice to be able to do that. Most of it is my own research. I'm not opposed to guests. I just haven't gotten to
Hmm.
that point yet.
Okay. Because the question I was going to ask was, do you have like a wish list of potential guests that you would like to have on your show? And let me stretch it a little bit. Either living or deceased. Like if you could have Martin Luther King on your show, would he be one of the people? Or if you could invite the Rosa Parks or Ida B. Wells or something on your show, would that be, what would be kind of your dream, your wish list of guests on your?
One of the topics that I did was the C.R. Patterson and Sons. They were the first Black-owned automobile makers,
Hmm.
which was, yeah, they were very interesting. So there was a deep dive into that one. I would love to
Okay.
hear their process. The only reason that they didn't make it is because Ford Motor Company had already started doing like their manufacturing. They weren't doing it by hand. They weren't making it by hand anymore. So that was the main reason their company did not last. I would love to talk to Augusta Savage. She was a sculptor. She actually made this sculpture that unfortunately is no longer in existence. It was called the harp, and it was basically like it was a harp made out of basically choir members, and it
Okay.
said lift every voice and sing. You can actually look up what the harp looked like on
Mm.
Google. I was like, it was beautiful, but unfortunately nobody decided to save her artwork, which was kind of a devastating for me because I would have loved to see that.
Hmm.
Um, I definitely said my mom. I told my mom already that I want her on here because to me
Yeah.
she is living history.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and I have I've already told her I have a fun episode already planned for her, and she knows
Okay.
it.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, that would be cool. Yeah, I know your family is definitely a Black history buffs and those who definitely hold an appreciation for African American history and culture. I know when I first met your parents years ago, I visited the house and all of the beautiful paintings and artwork was all over the walls. And I think one of the first gifts that I received from you all was a actual painting of a Black history painting and African American art and those kinds of things. So it's in your blood.
We have a lot of
Definitely.
Annie Lee. There is definitely a lot of Annie Lee art in the house.
Yeah, yeah. So that'll
And
be interesting.
yeah.
I would love I would love to hear that episode with you and your mom, just to hear, let her share some of the richness of her knowledge of all things African American and Black and all that good stuff. So yeah, okay, all right. So that's kind of your dream bucket list of guests, and you know when you are kind of thinking about those people who consume what it is you're offering, do you have an idea of the age, the what's the word I'm looking for,
Like the
kind of the
ranges.
demographic? Yeah, like is it younger folk, younger people who seem to have an interest in it, or is it kind of your millennials on back to the boomer?
So it's
um
more so my age and older.
mhm,
Um, but I know, like I said, my mom is a big cheerleader.
mhm.
She definitely tries to be like, hey, listen to this. They're like bite-sized episodes. I don't really have long episodes, only because I'm like, yeah, I don't know if I want to talk that much. But
Uh-huh.
she's like, hey, these are bite-sized episodes, so listen to it. Might learn something new, maybe not, and just go from there.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah. I asked is because, I think I kind of alluded to it earlier that these younger generation, they are not aware of many of the things that a contribution of African American culture and history and that kind of thing, nor do they have an interest in knowing and learning. And so, I know in the education space, it's kind of hard to get the young people to just be interested in being educated in general,
mhm.
but it's more so challenging to get them to be educated on things that pertains to the African American community. So I'm just curious to know, kind of your thoughts on what do you think could be some potential ways to try and engage the younger generation, to try to get them to, at least, be consumers of this information that you're sharing.
Growing up, we did a Black History Bowl.
Hmm.
So that was always something interesting because it made us learn at least little bits and pieces about different people. And then
Hmm.
of course we teamed up. We actually had competitions against other churches. And so it was good. It was a good it was good social banter, of course, and then it was a good way to get us to actually learn.
Hmm.
Also, it's good to basically have somebody like pull out of a hat. Give me basically it's like, hey, pull this out of a hat. Whose ever name you have on there, I want you to do research on this person, place, thing, or event. And then I
Hmm.
want you to just write up a summary of what you learned.
Hmm.
It To me, that would be the best way, but there's multiple different ways. I mean, trivia has always been something I know that a lot of people do get into. So I think trivia is one of the biggest ways that you could probably get the younger generations to interact. Of course, we know social media is a big proponent, and I know that they have a lot of stuff. They have different pages on like Facebook and TikTok that talk about different Black history events and
Mm-hmm.
people. And then, of course, you just have to, it's just finding the niche to get them interested.
Mhm.
It's the hard
Yeah,
part.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I know as you were saying that, I was thinking about that when I was in seminary. My thesis was on, preserving the family and church, African American church and family culture. And a part of my thesis, I talked about, the need for the churches to make sure, in the Black churches in that context, to make sure that there's a space carved out to teach and to present African American history, culture, and all that good stuff to the young people on a annual basis, not just February, if you will, but also in the family structure and the family dynamic. Also have those moments, create those moments to where those stories are shared, that information is shared, and then it's pushed and encouraged through the family model to impress it upon your kids. Now I know in my family, of course, my daughter Zoe, she knows that even from the earliest of years, we talked about that stuff. I've had them reading books. I make sure they were exposed to it just so they'd be aware. And so I understand that the personal responsibility as a parent and as a church leader to push it. And so, as you were speaking, it made me think about, we have to create these opportunities and these environments to have it pushed upon them, but then also come up with the creative ways, as you mentioned, to make it fun, for them to want, or engaging for them to want to learn it. Yeah.
My mom used to take us on what I call field trips when we were kids
Mm-hmm.
as well. I know in third grade, I actually went to school in Montgomery, Alabama in third grade, and we had the opportunity to go up to the Civil Rights Museum as well as the 16th Street Baptist Church, which was across the street. In third
Mm-hmm.
grade, my mom was a chaperone. We went to the museum, and then a few years after that, she took me, my sister, I think it was my grandmother and a couple of my cousins back to the museum again
Mm-hmm.
and the 16th Street Baptist Church. So we got to experience it more than once. And I honestly do think that everybody should go to that museum and the
Mm-hmm.
16th Street Baptist Church at least once.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we went to Temptation Park as well. I think that's also in Birmingham, if I remember correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So she made it, she made it a kind of event to be able to go on these, as we called it, like adventures and field trips to the different places. And
Yeah.
of course, like I said, growing up, we were not allowed to do Dr. Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, or Malcolm X. We had to do research on someone we did not know about.
Mm-hmm.
So it actually forced us to actually learn something outside of what most people would consider Black history.
Absolutely. Yeah, you just made me think about this year in the classroom, and every year that I teach social studies. So every year in February, one of the things that I have my students do is a project during the month of Black History, and it's oftentimes due at the end of the month of February. But this particular year, I made them do something different. I made them do what I call the Hidden Figures project. And of course, like you said, they could not choose, what you call the big three or any of the well-known mainstream African American figures that they usually do. So they had to choose lesser known figures. And I gave them like a list of suggested figures that many of them had never heard of, to do what you said, to make them dig and learn about something that they do not hear about all the time. And, many of them really appreciated it because they were very excited to discover things about African American figures that they never even heard of. And so, those creative ways of pushing them to dig and to find, and there's so much out there. There's so much out there to be learned. One of the things that I believe wholeheartedly, as an African American, and a student of history myself, I've always been fascinated with the African American experience, and just our whole journey from, West Coast Africa, transatlantic, passage, Virginia, the whole disbursement into the new world, and then having to create, these new cultures, and they're very unique, and how we just kind of evolved from, you know, you know, not having anything to work with, but still made it and created this. And now, it's just, to me, it's just fascinating. African Americans. And if I wasn't an African American, I think I'd still be fascinated with the story, and the resiliency of blacks, and just what we've managed to accomplish. And then it saddens me to know that, here we are now, we've evolved and we've gotten to a certain place in society, to now a lot of people, choose to kind of distance themselves from our history, as if they are ashamed of, the path that it took for us to become who we are. But nonetheless, we're fascinating people, to me. I mean, some people may feel different, but we're African Americans are just fascinating people. Yeah. All right. So if you had to give any advice for a person who wanted to start a podcast similar to the one that you're starting, some kind of like in a historical context, or something like that, what kind of advice would you have for them? What kind of?
I would definitely tell them to find your niche, find what works for you, find what works best for you. And I would say just do it. As in Nike, just go for it. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. I was like, that's how I feel. Just go for it. I was like, it is good to have viewers, but if you are doing something that you are passionate about, the viewers will come. It might take a minute, but they will come. Consistency is key.
Yeah.
Consistency is definitely key.
That's
And
my word.
yeah. And just go for it. It's like if it's something you are wholeheartedly passionate about, go for it. Find your
Hmm.
niche, find your niche and go for it, and then just start one foot in front of the other,
Yeah.
and just keep moving.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. When you said about, not be so consumed with trying to get the followers, but make sure it's something that's near and dear to you, that you're passionate about. Because, even if you don't get the thousands of followers, if you're able to be a blessing to just that one person, or,
Mhm.
that small group of people, because I know when I first started when I first got the idea to start a podcast, or God leading me to start the podcast, I had all these hesitancies, these questions about, who's going to listen to it? Nobody knows me. I won't have any followers, yada, yada, yada. But I always knew that I was very passionate about creating a platform to just have conversations about life and people's avenues and the things that they're involved in. And everybody has a story. Everybody has things that they're interested in. And so just wanted to create a space for that. And so, I don't have a whole lot of followers, but I do have, it's very rewarding when I hear those people say, hey, I really appreciate I listened to your podcast. And I'm like, man, I didn't realize that. Or when you're going to drop some more episodes. So, having an effect on whoever you're having an effect on, I think it's doing the job that it's meant to do. So I
And
appreciate
for you, I appreciate you very much because, of course, my mom was letting me know. She's like, "Yeah, he put your podcast in the flock notes." I was like-
it. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I appreciate you very much for that,
Yeah.
always.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when you got people doing stuff, and a lot of us have interests and talents and abilities, and a lot of times people don't know we have it. And then if we're putting it out there, I think that everybody should know about it and try and consume it, and see what see what God is doing in and through you know us. So yeah. And so one last, well, close to the last question. So people are listening to What in the Black History podcast. Is what do you hope they will walk away with after having listened to or having experienced one of your episodes? What is the what is the thing you hope they walk away with most or get from it the most?
I truly hope that they learn something new if it's something that they had not learned. Even my mom has, talked to me. She was like, "Yeah, I didn't know." She was like, "I didn't know this had occurred because I did a boxer, Archie Moore, I think his name was." And she's like, "Wow," because he taught Muhammad Ali he fought Muhammad Ali as well as I forgot the other boxer's name, but he was the only one with that who has that title that said that he actually got in the ring with two very popular boxers. And
Mm-hmm.
I just want them to go away with a little bit more knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Mm-hmm.
That's really all I want them to learn. Knowledge is power, and
Yeah.
the more you know, the better for it.
Okay. All right. All right. So if people want to keep up with Miss Josilin Stafford, what are some ways they can keep up with you or find you? You have any websites, social media handles, anything like that you want to share
No
with the people?
social media handles, but usually I was like, hey, if y'all have any episode suggestions,
Okay.
or comments or anything, you can email me. The email address is whatintheblackhistory@gmail.com. I
Mm-hmm.
always am open for suggestions in case it's something that I don't already have on my list. I would love more suggestions.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a lot of topics for years to come.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, we're excited about that. And I remember tuning into your very first episode. It was on the AME church, and at that particular time, I was actively pastoring in the church, and one of the reasons I even joined the AME church was because of its historical, context, and I was just so fascinated with how the church developed Richard Allen and that whole story about the withdrawal of the church, withdrawal from the church and starting their own church and the blacksmith shop and the envoy and its symbolism and just that whole walk of faith and them walking out saying that we're going to start under our own uh, how to say it, on our own vine and our own vine. And I forget the Lord have mercy. I can't think of it off top of my head. Yeah. But nonetheless, just that whole faith walk. And then has become an institution that's 200 plus years old
Mm-hmm.
and still, you
And
know,
worldwide.
based off this man's faith and a few other people's faith and their willingness to know that God will create a space and a place for African Americans who truly and sincerely wanted to serve God and worship God. And so, yeah, so definitely an appreciation. I know I have an appreciation for it, and there are many others who have an appreciation for history and definitely are loving the fact that you've packaged it in a way that people out here can consume it and enjoy it and learn and grow from what you're sharing. All right, Miss Jocelyn. Well, that's all I have. I just want to again thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be a guest on Faith Talk. Is there anything else you would like? Anything you want to leave us with before we sign off today?
No, I think that is everything thus far. So I hope that y'all will, indulge in the podcasts, both Face Talks and What in a Black History, and stay tuned.
All right. Well, thank you again. And again, Faith Talk, to all of you who are tuning in to us. Again, we're thankful for Miss Jocelyn Stafford, podcaster, What in the Black History. Make sure you check it out. Make sure you learn. Make sure you grow. And when you finish listening to What in the Black History, tune into Faith Talk, where we talk about all things at the intersection of faith and life. And so that's it for this episode. And so we pray God's blessings upon you until we meet again. So remember again, here at Faith Talk, we talk all things life and faith. And so until next time, peace and God bless. All right, Miss Jocelyn.